It's so interesting. In fact, I think we discussed with you this the other day where we were saying that even in the African context, sometimes you will go even for, whatever function it could be. It could be a funeral, a wedding, any kind of, and you will find there could even be a pastor there, but for some reason they'll call the woman of the house to come pray, and you're like, where is the man, and always ends up being a woman praying in a lot of these functions. Yeah, but like we're saying, it's just somehow men not taking the initiative. And I think in the Bible, the charge is very clear in terms of God saying that, for the man, you're the one who is supposed to, cheer your wife, lead your children. It even talks about leading children without antagonizing them. I think there's a verse, I'm considering the verse, that it talks about, that these things are actually meant to be done by the men, and we somehow forget these things. The Bible also tells us that for us men, we're supposed to love our wives like Christ loves the church.
That's hard.
And when you think about, yes, and you think about that kind of love, you're just like, some people, you're just like, nah, man, nah, But God calls us to be the priests at home. And you imagine that God wants us to love our wives as as Christ loves the church. It just makes you understand how big that task is, And for me as a man, I normally take it in terms of, even I tell people, I think a lot of times clients call me and they're like, oh, how come? Even prior to this pandemic, they'd be like, you seem to be home a lot. And for me, a lot of my clients, I tell them, don't call me after work hours. I'm not going to pick up your calls because once I get home, it's family time. I also tell a lot of people, if you WhatsApp me or try to call me at night, you're not likely to get me because then it's family time that has specific things that have been set up for that family time. And one of the things is like, let's start with the wife. As the priest of the house, you're supposed to lead her to Christ. That means probably apart from your own quiet time that you're having with God, you need to be in a position where you're like leading her to Christ in terms of like, do you talk about God? Do you have devotions? How do you shape up perceptions in relation to her relationship to Christ? Do you pray over her? Do you encourage her on the things she's doing? Do you cheer her on as she's doing on her things, or are you always putting her down? There's that aspect of being the priest in that sense. The same way that Christ loves on us, the same way that Christ wants the good things for us, that it should reflect in your relationship with your wife or your spouse. Now, for the children, that God is given us the charge in terms of discipline, in terms of tying the words tying His words on their hearts. And in the Old Testament, the adults are told, tie these words into your child's heart as you walk with them, as you teach them, as you're in the field. Okay, today is different. You want to be in the field, but there are opportunities. Could decide, like for me, I'm very deliberate with how I do my things. If I'm running an errand where I can go with my daughters, I tend to go with them simply because I know somewhere along the way there's an opportunity for a lesson. There's an opportunity for an interaction that will help them, better understand just even how to live. So that's one. I can say, like with my children, I'm very deliberate. I'll try to involve them in as much as I do, even in my work. A lot of times I will even go to work with them. They are free. I'll step with them and we'll step into work. But then we do have a scheduled time with them in the evenings. So typically I'll do with them Bible reading. I do with them a Bible reading, and then we have journals where every day they write what they are thanking God for on that day, and then what they're trusting God for. So that we do every day, irrespective of what has happened in the course of the day. That will happen every day. With my wife, we also have a set up time, though not necessarily in relation to prayer or reading the Bible, but after the kids have gone to sleep, we have about 1.5 hours where we sit and just talk. General talk. We'll have the phones off, have the TV off. We'll talk about. Right now, it's different with the pandemic because you have the whole day to talk. Yeah. But prior, we talk, like we'd start with just how the day was, work related. What are you planning for tomorrow? What are the things that you're hoping that can undertake? And we still have them even these days. I think it was just the day before yesterday that I was asking her what she's trusting God for in relation to her work, and and we ended up praying for it. So yeah, and a lot of these things go back to having to take initiative, because again, if you leave them to chance, then they never happen. It has to be scheduled where okay, this happens on a particular day at a particular time, and so it's not something that you're hoping for. So for us, that's one of the ways that we've done. And Wednesdays, okay, right now it's lagging behind, but typically, like on Wednesdays, we'd have a prayer day where we just like worship. Like, in fact, right now, because we are home a lot, we have in the background we have a lot of. There's a channel I subscribe to called Tribal Music. Well, just play a lot of worship music, and pretty much most of the day the music will just be playing in the background. And you'll find the girls even these days sometimes will just be like, "Can I pray for you?" Just because of what you have playing in the background. But previously, we would have it like on Wednesdays, where we just sit and pray, not sort of informalish, but sit and you can pray and listen, ask if anybody wants to be prayed for. You'd ask, do they have friends they think they need to be prayed for something? And that just kind of now guides them and leads them to being interested. Interestingly, how my girls ended up asking to have their own Bibles is because they saw me during my quiet time. Go to a point where they'll be like, we don't want you to read for us from your Bible. We want our own Bibles. And I ended up having to give them some Bibles.
Wow.
Of course, they had to be a bit color friendly. Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's how they actually ended up getting their Bibles. And I know, in fact, it reminded me of what Paul says, where he tells his followers to be imitators of what he does. And it's so interesting with children, because they'd see me even highlight my Bible with a highlighter. They also wanted highlighters. Probably don't even know what the highlighter is doing, but they're just like, yeah, he goes into his Bible with a highlighter. So in terms of that context, I'd say that's how the priest role comes into play in the family. There's also an aspect of prophet, and basically the prophet is just praying into their lives, which I do also some regularly. One of the things we've done, even as we were naming our children before they were born, was always asking God, because we understood that when you come onto this earth, God is calling you to a specific cause, as we are saying in terms of legacy, and we named them according to what we felt God was calling them to be. So our firstborn is called Sena, which literally means praise to God, praise be to God, or glory to God. Our secondborn is called Kyria, which means noble lady of the Lord. And then our thirdborn is called Kenakulani, which means joy or happiness resembling heaven. So now, in the context of that, we then normally pray, asking God, what do you want for this child? And then speaking to it in prophecy and say, okay, we call this person to be a representation of your kingdom on earth. How does that look here? And kind of speaking to it. So there's also that aspect of being, and cheering them on and telling them, okay, if this is what you want to be in life, I speak into your life, may you receive as God has ordained it. So there's also the aspect of the prophecy in the priesthood.
Wow. That's a lot of good information. I'm challenged. I'm sure a lot of people are watching right now and they're like, it's too much. Yeah, you're doing so much. I'm really encouraged by the example that you're showing.
Yeah.
I think it's great that It's Father's Day. We're celebrating fathers, and hopefully to a lot of people it's motivation to be proactive, because that's what I'm hearing. You're very proactive. You're thinking ahead, to how you name a child. It's not just after somebody that you knew, but you're being strategic, within the
Yes,
family, and how to raise
yes,
them up in the ways of the
yes,
Lord. It doesn't just happen
yes,
magically. It's funny. A lot of people get upset. Why isn't the next generation behaving better? But what are we
yes,
investing as parents into the
yes,
next generation?
yes,
Things don't
yes.
happen flippantly, but you
A
have
lot,
to be intentional.
yeah, a lot of people are actually not parenting, and then when wondering why they are seeing the things they are seeing, with the parenting aspect, even as you see, I mean, God constantly gave instructions on this is how you should do it, this is how you should do it, this is how you should do, So, but somehow people think, let's just leave it to the graces of God, or hope that the teacher in school is instilling certain aspects in their lives, and yet it's the solely rests with the parents. And I keep on telling people, uh, even my one of my employees always asks me, challenges, because it's like, why do you keep on going home? You don't, if there's no work, you're already home. I keep on telling him, uh, there are only two things in this life that I currently cannot delegate. I cannot delegate being a husband, and I cannot delegate being a father. So everything else I do, I can delegate. So I'm like, those two
That's
roles,
good.
they require me to be there consistently. Anything else I can delegate, and you guys can do.
Yeah, that's
So
really good.
yeah,
Everything else you can delegate, but to be a
yeah,
father and to be a husband, it's
yeah,
you. Yeah, it's part
yeah,
of you to
yeah,
step up. So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying a man's role in the family isn't to come home and prop his feet up and read the Gazette, watch the TV. It's much more, and that probably is
yeah,
frustrating for some guys. And I'm
yeah,
sure the ladies are like, "Yeah, you preach it, Peter."
yeah. Yeah, in the African context, it was enough for the man to put a roof over your head. The primary needs. So he puts a roof over your head. You guys are fed, and you get to school. Get an education, and that was enough. You really didn't need to do anything more. But you do realize that it takes more than that. And sometimes even it's interesting. Like, I don't know if you've noticed it, because you also have girls like me. But there are times like uh, Esther, who is my wife, will tell the girls to do something like 4, 5, 6 times, and they just won't do it. And I'll say it once, and it will get done. And sometimes I wonder, is it something intrinsic? Like, and I'll not even shout or anything. I'll just be like, girls, you need to get this thing done. And for some reason, it's done almost prompt, you know. And sometimes I wonder, is it something intrinsic? Is it something that maybe is even by design, you know, that that they will respond, a certain way to a father's voice or something? I don't know. Maybe some research needs to be done to it. I don't know, but
Yeah.
it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that you notice even that kind of difference in terms of that relation. Yeah, but it's for men to take an active role. I mean, just this last week, I was discussing with another man, and he was telling me that it has taken the pandemic and for a husband to be home to realize that the children were even moved to different schools, prior to the pandemic. And I was like, he's a father and didn't even know the children have moved to another school. Like,
Yeah, yeah. But sadly, so many
some of
fathers
these
are,
things should be at the forefront.
yeah, so many fathers are clueless, to the simplest things at
Yeah,
home. I think because maybe the
yeah,
generation they've seen, or they haven't had a mentor in their life, they just think that, at home,
yeah,
they give it to the wife, they give it to the woman, and they're hands off. They just bring home the money, the bread,
yeah,
and
yeah,
don't see themselves. But what you're saying, the scriptures teach us as men, if
yeah,
we're going to be a biblical man,
yes,
we should be
yeah,
the leader in that role. And I think, like you're saying, the statistics that I've
yes,
seen have proven that there is a special role
Yeah.
when the father takes initiative, when the father is present. If you look at church attendance in adults, it's almost double. If someone's raised in a home where it's the mother, only the mother taking the kid to church, and then you're raised in a family
Yes.
where the husband is there, it's almost 3 times as high
Yes.
if the husband's there going to church with the kids,
Yes.
that
Yes.
when they're adults,
Yeah.
they're going to be
Yeah.
in church and with the Lord. I mean,
Yeah.
it's incredible. Not that they're doing something special other than being present and being that person that God has designed them to, to be. The same thing with prison. And I don't know the exact
Yes.
statistics. I'd have to look it up, but it's high. The people that get in
Yes.
prison, most of them, the father has not been in their home. They're raised either by their
Yes.
mother or by some other relative. They didn't have a consistent
Yeah.
fatherhood figure in their life. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, it's a high calling.